Hey everybody, welcome back to another very exciting episode of the Photoshop Training Hour. I am your host, Jesus Ramirez. Happy May the 4th and happy Star Wars Day. This stream is sponsored by good friends at MSI and the Creator Z16P laptop, which is this laptop right here. Is a laptop that I use to create on the go. I encourage you to check it out. The link is below in the description. I created this poster using Adobe stock assets and Pixel Squid assets. If you don't know what Pixel Squid is, let me show you really quickly. Let me just create a new tab here and I will type in Pixel Squid on the search bar here and you can see Pixel Squid 3D. And under search, you can simply type in Star Wars. It probably should be 2 words, but that's okay. And you can see some of the assets that you can download for free. And the way that these works is that you can click on the free ones if you like. And you can just click and rotate a 3D model and then you can export that as a PSD or PNG to use on your project. So that's where I got the Star Wars assets for this particular composite. So I already have a file that I started from scratch here, and I took the liberty to create a horizon line here. You can see my horizon line. It's always a good idea to determine where the horizon line is in your composite because everything will relate to it. So just to save time, I just created this guide. Just click and drag down to place a guide. If you don't see the rulers panel, you can press Control R on Windows, Command R on the Mac. By the way, thank you so much. I see a lot of comments, people from India, Russia. Thank you so much. Pakistan. Awesome. There's a question in the chat. Any free stock websites? The one that I like to recommend is Adobe Stock. Now, Adobe Stock is a paid stock website, but they have free assets. So you can just go into the drop down here and select free, and they have a lot of free content. So for example, in this case, we were working with a beach, right? For the composite, you can just type in beach and you can see all the free assets. You can see the word free here. So you have a lot of free assets. I don't know the number, but it's a lot. You can find a lot of great stuff on here. You can also find free videos, free templates for your design projects, and free 3D assets as well. So I highly would recommend checking out the free stuff at Adobe Stock. Obviously, there's paid assets, but there's always a lot of great content in the free section. So I would recommend that you check that out. Regal says hello. How's it going, Regal? Good to see you. So yeah, so let's get right into it. We don't have a lot of time. We only have 1 hour, so I want to try to provide as much value as possible. So what I'm going to do first is open up this beach asset, and it's just a regular beach, and I want that to be the main background for my image as you see here. And there's a lot of ways of making selections in Photoshop. I usually try to think of what would create the best selection in the shortest amount of time possible. Sometimes the actual best selection may not be the most time efficient. So when you kind of have to make that decision of efficiency over time, time over efficiency, or whatever you prefer. In this case, I can get a very good selection just by using one of the automated features in Photoshop. If you go into the select menu, you can choose sky. This will use artificial intelligence known as Adobe Sensei to make a selection out of the sky. But I don't want to select the sky. If I just click on the layer mask icon, I'll erase the foreground, which is what I really want. So with the selection active, all you have to do is hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click, and Photoshop will select the opposite thing that you had selected, in this case the foreground, and that's what I want. Here's the trick for you guys. If you hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click, you can see the layer mask. And the AI did a good job, but it's not perfect, and that's okay. We're going to place another sky behind it, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but we can always refine it. And I like to refine a mask by using the burn tools and dodge tools. Burn makes pixels darker, therefore it hides them. And you can select what range. So I'm going to select the shadows, and I'm just going to paint on these areas here just to get a better selection in those areas. And obviously I'm going to go quickly. I don't have to be perfect. That's okay. Precision is not always that important, especially in a situation like this. Then you can select the dodge tool and do the same thing, but this time I have the highlights selected under range, so Photoshop will target the highlights. So I'm trying to bring some of these palm trees that Photoshop didn't quite get. I'll switch back into the burn tool and I'll just get the areas here that Photoshop missed. And again, it doesn't have to be precise. This will work great. Once you're done with refining your selection, you can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click. And that brings back the regular view. At this point, you can click and drag this layer into your working composition, drop it in there, and just figure out where you want to place it. Control T on Windows, Command T on the Mac to transform, and you can scale it into position. So maybe something like this. That might be a little too big. By the way, here's another trick. So Adobe, in their infinite wisdom, decided to remove or hide the pivot point. It's actually called a reference point. I call it the pivot point. But when you click on this checkbox, you can have access to this little reference point. And what that allows you to do is move it to an area and then rotate or scale from that area. That's why I call it the pivot point, because it allows you to like pivot through that area from that spot. So once you have something into position like this, but it's not the right scale, you can enable the reference point and then move it over into that area, or you can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click, and then just goes into whatever area you click. But the point is that you can set it on that horizon line. If you hold Alt and Shift, you can click and drag and scale from that point. So I'm scaling, but I'm still keeping it on that horizon line. So right about there. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Awesome, no questions, just a bunch of hellos. Awesome, cool. So now that I have this background in place, I can hide the guide. I'm not going to need it anymore. I'm going to use this layer as reference going forward. So I can press Control and the semicolon key to hide the guide. Some people like to hide guides by pressing Control H, Command H, and that works. But the downside of doing that is that you're hiding all extras. So you may have other extras that you want to keep in your working document. So just to specifically target the guides, you can press Control and semicolon. Double click on the hand tool fits the image to screen. Let's go for the low-hanging fruit now. Let's work with the sky. I can select the sky layer, come and drag that down, and I can just place it into position. No biggie whatsoever. I just wanted to use a different sky than what the original image had, and that looks fantastic. I also have this image of a beach that I want to use. So I'm going to drag that down and place it on top of everything else and just scale it accordingly and try to figure out what I want. And that looks pretty good. With the rectangular marquee tool, I'll just make a selection around these areas, click on the layer mask icon, and there it is. Now we're approaching the first challenging part of this composite, and that is making sure that the water matches. You can do that in so many different ways. One of the easiest ways is to select this beach layer and create a curves adjustment layer. You can then click on this icon so that any adjustment that you make on this curves adjustment layer only affects that beach. So the bottom layer is a little bit brighter, so I'm going to click and drag this up. And by the way, the curves adjustment layer works a lot like a dimmer switch. Like at home, you may have a dimmer switch when you can drag the light switch up and you get more light, or drag down and you get less light. Same thing here. Click, drag up, more light, or drag down, less light. That's basically how the curves adjustment layer works. So I'm going to click and drag up to add more light. Then we have channels, red, green, and blue. You can do the same thing. You can click and drag up to add more light in the color of that channel, so more red, or drag down to subtract the light in that channel and get the opposite color, in this case cyan. So if I drag down just a little bit, notice how I start getting some cyan in there and the water starts matching just a little bit better. I can go into the blue channel and do the same. Drag up just to add a little bit of blue. And in the green channel, maybe I can drag down to reduce green, and I can just keep fine tuning these accordingly until I get a result that I'm happy with. Something like that should work. And you can always come back and make changes later. On this layer, the one with the beach, I can use my Wacom tablet. I think I'll use my Wacom tablet now just because it offers me more control. So I have a Wacom tablet here. It's just the Intuos Pro Medium, nothing fancy. And with my brush tool, and let me put it the right way, I kind of flipped it upside down. And with my brush tool, I can just paint with black. And I like to click on this icon here to get pressure sensitivity. And I can just sort of blend these two together. See that? And again, I'm going quickly, but that's okay. I'm just going to blend these together so they kind of look like it's part of the same body of water, like so. And I'm using the X key to swap between foreground and background color. White reveal, so I want to reveal a little bit of this color up here. I'm just trying to get a good blend between the two. And obviously you can spend all day fine-tuning these small details. I like to leave all the small details to the end, but I think you get the idea. Awesome, everybody. Thank you so much for the wonderful comments. Hello, Amred, Zan, Christy. Thank you so much. Cool. So let's move on to the next part of the composite, which is the sand. And by the way that I like to work is in a modular way, which means that things are contained in their own little module, so I can later change them if I want to. So that offers me the greatest flexibility. And it's fantastic when you're doing client work. I guess I'll talk a little bit about my client work in a moment, but let's work on this beach first. So I'm going to drag this sand over like so. And I'm kind of working on scale a little bit. Maybe here, and I'll duplicate the layer, Control J, Command J on the Mac, and I'll drag this up right about here. Then I'll hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon to create a black layer mask. By the way, this is actually very important. So I'll undo that layer mask. If you just create a regular layer mask and then fill it with black, that's not the same thing. And let me show you why. If you unlink the layer with the move tool, you can click and drag and notice what happens. The mask is just a black box. See that? That's like, that wouldn't necessarily work for a lot of things that we want to do. See that? It's just a black box. So instead, it's better to hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click, and that creates an infinitely black mask. If I hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click, and I can click and drag, see how I'm dragging it, but it's infinitely black. It just never goes to white. So that's the difference. So I like to have an infinite black mask in situations like this. Cool. So now I can just paint with white on these areas. And sorry about that. I have my touchpad enabled and I accidentally moved the tablet. And actually, what did I do here? That I did something wrong here. Let me just go back a few times. Here we go. Black mask. And when I paint with white, it reveals it. There we go. So, and the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want the scale to change so much. Kind of like faking the perspective. And I could have distorted the mask, I guess, and try to keep a similar perspective, but you know, I figure this will be faster and easier. Who knows? Is it faster? Is it easier? I don't know. That's the decision I went with. And then I can unlink the mask and then move it if I need to. I think I'm fine. I think this will work. I just didn't want the, actually, you know what? Maybe I need to move it down a little bit so that the scale changes on top here. And now I'm going to distort it a little bit so it doesn't look exactly like the one on the bottom. And this is what compositing is. A lot of times you just make decisions as you go. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. So something like that. And again, I just didn't want that perspective not to match. And I figured that this will look better than just going to a distortion. Cool. This is looking fantastic. I guess I can paint a little bit more with white on this mask to make sure that all those pixels come through like so. And I can put these two into a group, call this group beach, add a layer mask, and then I can fade in by painting with black with the beach that was there on the image below. Just trying to blend them in, trying to make it seem like it's part of the same scene. This is looking fantastic. We have people watching from Nigeria. Thank you so much for Rain. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Thank you so much. Cool. So what we're gonna do now is maybe add a clipping mask to this curves adjustment layer so that I can match the same color of the sand here. I'm just trying to brighten it up a bit. It might have a little too much red, so I'm just gonna bring it down just a tad. So you can see the before and the after. I'm just trying to make everything look the same, and then I can do like a global adjustment and make sure that everything matches. I'm going to put all these layers into a group, Control G on Windows, Command G on the Mac, and I can just call this background. So now I have my background, and I can always come back and edit it. I'm not stuck with what I have. As you can see, in the original version, I worked a lot more on perspective and blending and all of that. We probably won't have that much time on this stream to take care of all of that, but you get the idea. What I can do now is open up my Jedi here. So double click on her. And by the way, if you're interested in finding out what these assets are, let me show you how to get to them. Let me bring up this tab, and right here I have this Rogue to Adobe Live concept where you can actually see my stream on Adobe Live, or actually created this. And you can scroll down and you can see the assets that I use. The links are here. Some are free, some are not. I don't think the Jedi is a free image, but if you want to use the watermark version to practice, you can certainly do so. So that is where you can find it on my Behance page. So you can go into behance.net/JR from PTC, and this is it. And by the way, now that we're here, so we don't have to come back to it, I do want to mention that I recently started working with a company called BLT Communications, which is a company that creates movie posters. And I worked on several projects with them. I recently collaborated with BLT on creating the Hacks Season 2 poster. So this is something that I worked on, and also the vertical version of that as well. So I am getting my practice in creating movie posters and actual projects. I can't show all the ones that I've worked on because they haven't been released yet, but I've done 3 so far. So this is the first one that it's been released under the BLT advertising agency that I've been working with, and with my good friend Lisa Carney, who also works in the Hollywood industry. I collaborated with her and we created the Good Sam movie TV poster that was also on the website. So this is where I'm getting to practice all these techniques in the real world. This is not fan art, is the real world, and it can be very, very difficult just because you have a lot of art directors and clients that you have to please with everything. But something else that I want to mention about working in that type of environment is that everything needs to be labeled. So on this final one, you can actually see how every single layer has a name, and not only a name, but it also has the blend mode and the opacity that I used for that specific layer. That's a habit that I got into now working on this type of production environment. Your files are going to be touched by a number of people, so everything needs to be labeled and everything needs to be organized. Notice how I'm using labels, and like I said, everything is modularized so that things could quickly be edited and change if need be. So yeah, that's something I wanted to point out. Actually, now that I'm talking about that, I'll show you another trick. If you create a new layer, since I have to name all those layers the way that I mentioned, I actually created an action that automatically names a layer for me. So if I hold Shift and F2, notice now that this layer is called normal opacity 100, and I can edit it if need be, and I can add a name to this layer, whatever it may be. And the way that you would do that is by going into the actions panel and just create a new action by clicking on this icon, and I'll call it Photoshop training hour name so that we know what it is. I'll assign a function key, the F3 and the shift key. I'll click record, and now I can just call the layer Photoshop training hour name or something like that, right? So I can now stop that action, and if I create a new layer, I can use that keyboard shortcut that I assigned. Oh, sorry about that. I needed to do it on an actual layer, not a smart object. So let me do that again. You can create a new layer. Click on the new action button. I'll call it Photoshop training hour name, record. I'll just call it layer name Photoshop training hour, so we know it's different. Hit stop. Notice that I forgot to add a keyboard shortcut. No problem. I can go into the action here and assign a function F. I'll do F4, shift, press OK. So now if I create a new layer, shift F4, notice that the layer name changes. So that's one of the few things that I've done recently, to help my workflow and be a little faster. But that's how you would go about creating an action that quickly names your layer. And you can definitely create multiple actions with different layer names, different blending modes, different opacities, whatever you use most often. That way you don't waste time naming layers. But anyway, that's a trick I wanted to show you guys. Talking about tricks that people don't usually see, let me show you another one. I'm gonna open up this stormtrooper model here, and what I'll do is I'm gonna go into edit, and we're going to define a pattern out of that stormtrooper, and I'll press OK. Now in my working composition, I know I said I was going to work on the Jedi, but I thought of another trick to show you guys. In my working composition, I want to have stormtroopers lined up along the beach. So of course I can drag the stormtrooper in, scale him into position, move him to the right location, and then duplicate the layer by holding the Alt or Option key, right? I can certainly do that, but that just seems like a lot of work and too time consuming. So instead, I thought of another technique, and it kind of worked. So let's check it out. With the pen tool, make sure that you create a path, and then just create a path along the curve. And I'm gonna like curve it so it's not perfectly straight. I don't think a perfectly straight curve will work in this case, at least not as well. And that seems pretty good. That's our path. Now, with the path selected here in the paths panel, my work path is selected. I'm gonna go into edit and fill. The reason the fill is not enabled is because I don't have a layer. I need a layer. So layer there, edit, fill, or you can use the shift key and the backspace key on Windows, shift and delete on the Mac, and it brings up the same window. And you can go into pattern, and there it is. I have my stormtrooper pattern selected. Make sure you enable script and place along path. Press OK. And this is gonna look, the preview, don't even worry about the preview because it doesn't give you a good representation of what will happen. But the important values are here. Pattern scale 0.1. What does that mean? 0.1 means 10% of the original size of the pattern. So 100% of the original size of the pattern will be 1. So we're gonna go 10%, 0.1. Spacing, reducing the spacing in between each of the pattern elements. 120 pixels will work fine in this case. All the other values at default are fine, except for brightness randomness. I want the brightness to shift a little bit between each of the stormtroopers, so I'm going to increase the value randomness just a little bit. If you get that error that just happened on my screen, I'm not sure why it happens, but if you get it, don't worry about it. Just press OK. Press OK again, and nothing's going to happen because of that error. But if you go into edit, fill, you'll see the same values again. Just press OK and press OK one more time, and then Photoshop will just fill the stormtroopers there. See that? They all have slightly different values of brightness, and since the path was not straight, they're all not aligned in the same area. And now I don't need my path, so I can delete it, can go back into the layers panel, and I can just scale these guys into position. And I think this gives me a much, much better result. And then I can press the V key to select the move tool, Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac to duplicate as I drag. And I can place these guys right about here into position. And it looks like I need to duplicate one more time. So I'll do that again. I guess I could have made a smaller pattern, but you know, it is what it is. Here we are. Now I can just put these layers into one single layer, Control E on Windows, Command E on the Mac to merge. So there they are. That's a fast and easy way to create a line of stormtroopers. Let me see if there's any questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Getting a lot of love from all over the world. UK, Bangladesh, Algeria. Thank you so much. The Alps. Awesome. Annapolis. Thank you so much. Jaina, Mark, Tom. Thank you very much. Cool. So now that we have that, we can work on the Jedi that I promised a second ago. So let me close these windows that are not really helping us. So same thing, to make a selection, I like to go for the easy route first. So I'll try select subject, which will create a selection around the main subject. In this case, it does a good job. You can press the Q key on the keyboard to enter the quick mask mode. With quick mask, you can see the areas that are not selected in red. So you can select something like the polygonal lasso tool and then maybe add to the mask here on this area where the lightsaber is, fill with white. White is my background color. Alt and backspace. Option backspace on the Mac. I don't like how the cape is flowing behind her leg here, so I'll remove it. Fill with black. Alt and backspace, and actually fill with the background colors. Control backspace. I said the wrong keyboard shortcut earlier. Control backspace, Command backspace. And obviously you can just spend a little more time fine-tuning the smaller details. I'm not going to do that in this case just because of the lack of time. But you can just paint on these areas. And again, I'm going quickly here. And I'm painting with black just to hide those areas. And when you're done, press the Q key again and create a layer mask. It looks fantastic. I can just call this layer Jedi. And I can even keep adding elements to this image. I guess I'll do that a little later on because I do want to brighten her up first. And I don't want my elements to be affected by the brightening effect. So we'll leave this as is. And I'm just going to click and drag this layer onto our working composition. There she is. And I can scale her accordingly. I kind of like the look of her just kind of like coming in here. So maybe I could have created a different version where she's closer to the camera. I don't know, something like that might be kind of cool. But we'll stick with the original concept, which was her right about here, give or take, and she's facing the other side, like so. And I kind of like that better. So here we are. What I can do now is just place her into position more or less. Create a curves adjustment layer. Click on this icon to clip it to a layer below, and I can just drag up to add more light. Remember what I said earlier? It's kind of like a dimmer switch. I'm dragging up to get more light. So I'm brightening her up like so, something like that. Something that I want to do, and this is something I did not show on the stream with Adobe Live, is I wanted to add more details to the image, like the sand on her feet. So to do that, I can use this asset right here. I'm just going to drag and drop that asset here and just scale it down a little bit. Notice that the sand is bright and the background is black. Well, we can remove the black by using a blending mode. If we select screen, that removes the black and just keeps the sand. So I can just place sand on her shoe like so. Then I can hold, I'll name this sand. That layer name is way too long. Then I can double click to the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window. And on the underlying layer slider, I can drag this to the right, hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click to create a smooth transition. And you can kind of see how now this is looking much, much better. I'll do the same on the other side. Drag to the right or left, sorry, Alt and Windows, Option on the Mac, and create a smooth transition like so. And you can decide, how you want the sand to affect the shoe, and of course you can move it around and find the best spot for the sand. You could also, at this point, hold Alt and Windows, Option on the Mac, and click to create a black mask. And with a brush and white as your foreground color, you can start painting in some of the details on just her shoe, so no other areas of the composite are affected. And of course, you can create a clipping mask as well to make sure that only her body controls these areas, like so. And of course, do the exact same thing on the other side. So I just duplicated the layer by pressing Control J on Windows, Command J on the Mac, and I'm just gonna move this over to this side, like so. And I'll continue painting with white on that mask to reveal those sand particles on different areas, like so. I can unlink the layer and move the layer independently from the layer mask so I can find something that works. And I think that looks pretty good. What I'll do now is I'll put all these layers into one group. I'll call it Jedi. And what you need to do now is just find the natural mounds in the sand and use that to mask the shoe out so it looks like she's really standing in this area. And of course, you can be very loose at first, just kind of figure out what the contours are. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. Just come back and edit it later. So I'm just doing this for now. And I think this looks pretty good in terms of positioning. I'm going to come back and refine it in a moment. Maybe something like this. I kind of like this better, actually. And it's taking me a little while. So what I'll do is I'll just select a different brush. I'll make sure my hardness is up a bit more. And again, just look at the natural mound here and how it would really cover her feet. Maybe even deeper here. Whatever looks good to your eye. Something like that should work. Notice that in the final image, I actually did spend more time finding areas that really match. And notice that the sand here is kind of smooth. It wouldn't be that way. You'll actually see some chunks. So what you can do is click on this icon to edit your brush and make sure that under Shape Dynamics, you adjust the size jitter. And also I will create sort of a flat brush like so. And under Shape Dynamics, adjust the angle jitter as well. So it creates that really jagged look. And I think this is pretty good. Let's see how that works in practice. Yeah, that'll look good. The brush is way too big, but it should work. So let me make this brush smaller by tapping on the left bracket key. There you go. Something like that. I just got to find the right size. And I just, the sand wouldn't be perfectly straight. And again, I'm going quickly here. I probably will need to refine the brush further if I was actually like working on a real project. I'm not exactly sure I like how the clumps are so big, but that's fine. It's fine for the tutorial. But you can see that in my actual image, I worked a little more on that sand. Great. I'll save the image and see if there's any questions in the chat. Awesome. We got people from Colorado, Brazil, Germany. Thank you so much, Tom. Oh, wait, no. Amovidos in Brazil. Tom, I'm not sure if you mentioned where you are, but thank you so much. Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. What I'm going to work on now is add a little bit of texture to her. I don't really have a texture layer here, but I know I have some grunge textures in my library here. So let me just search for all libraries and I can just drag one of these grunge textures and then just put it on her, just because I feel that, she wouldn't be so clean and so smooth. She's like a warrior. So just adding this roughness kind of helps. I clip the layer to her just so that it only applies to her body. And then I can select something like the soft light blending mode and bring the opacity down. You just want just a hint that things are not so smooth. See that? Before and after. I think that really helps. I can also increase the contrast by crunching the whites and blacks, and then just adjusting this accordingly. So maybe something like that, just so that it's not so smooth. I can also double click to the side of the layer and do the same blend diff trick so that those textures don't apply to like the deepest shadows. And I think that creates even a more realistic effect. So something like this. I think this works much, much better. And you can see how on my final piece here, you can sort of see what that looks like there. Awesome. So now it's time to work on the lightsaber. The lightsaber is actually very simple. What you can do, and actually before we get to the lightsaber, I'm noticing they're about halfway through. And what I want to do is talk about our sponsors, MSI. So let me just bring up the MSI page that I have here so we can speak about our sponsors. So this stream is sponsored by MSI, the Creator Z16P laptop. So this is the laptop here. It's a beautiful laptop. Actually, if you're not familiar with MSI, just know that MSI was one of the Reader's Choice laptop brands for 2022. And there's actually an article in the description that talks about that. Apple and MSI tied last year for overall satisfaction, so that you can be sure that MSI is a reputable company. And one of the greatest things about MSI, this particular laptop, the Creator Z16P laptop, is the latest Intel i9 processor. The CPU is crucial for content creators. Design apps highly rely on processor performance. So this one has a fantastic processor. It's the latest 12th gen Intel Core i9 processor. Also, it has the GeForce RTX 30 video card, which allows you to do lots of cool things, including rendering and editing 8K HDR raw video. And you can also work with 3D models as well, and Photoshop, of course. The screen is fantastic. It has a 16:10 aspect ratio, an extra value. Instead of 9, it's 10, which gives you more space to work with on design applications. So as you can see in the example, they're working on Adobe Premiere. Oh wait, no, that's not Premiere. That's Adobe After Effects. They're working on Adobe After Effects, and you can see that there's more room to see the panels. Same thing will be true in Photoshop. The screen is touchscreen, and there is an MSI pen that you can use with this laptop. So it is a fantastic computer. Also, it has DCI-P3 at 100% for fantastic colors and visuals. It's Kalman certified, and all the laptop screens are pre-calibrated at the factory, so you get the best colors possible. So I highly recommend that you check out the Creator Z16P laptop. The link is in the description. Thank you, MSI, for sponsoring another episode of the Photoshop Training Hour. Cool. So let me come back on screen and let me bring up Photoshop once again. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat, by the way. Cool. So the next thing that we're going to work on is the lightsaber. And as I mentioned, it's very easy. You can just do a rectangle like so. I will make the fill white, and then I can zoom in and click and drag on this icon, drag it down, and just creates that rounded corner there. And what I can do now is just place this into position. I can just place that right about there, press Control T, Command T to transform. I can drag this pivot point, reference point to here, or I can just use this icon right here. I can click on that center top icon and it just snaps it right in there. And now I can rotate this from that pivot point and scale from that pivot point. And I can just place this more or less where I want it. You may not be perfect, and that's okay. We're gonna actually mask out the original lightsaber, but I'm just using it as reference for now. Once I have that more or less into position, I can use the direct selection tool and I can just make this a little bit wider because the lightsaber will be a little bit thicker closer to us, and because of perspective, this will not be as thick. So I'm kind of making that smaller, like so, something like that. And again, I'm going quickly here. Do spend a little more time in your projects getting a better shape, but that's what it looks like. And I can take this lightsaber and I can place it way down here beneath her. And at this point, I can just mask out the original lightsaber because we don't need it anymore. So I'm just going to make a selection with the lasso tool, like so, and fill with black on that mask. And now I only have the lightsaber that I just created. And to create the glowing effect, all I'm going to do is double click to the side of the layer, add an outer glow, and the glow will be blue. It could be whatever color you want. And sorry, I like Star Wars, but I'm not super into the mythology, so I don't know if what lightsaber creates what color. And so forgive me if this is like a famous lightsaber that should be a different color. But you can just increase the opacity on that outer glow like so. And you can also create an inner glow. And I'm going to use that light blue. And again, adjust the size a little bit, press OK. And also when you have a shape, like I do here, a vector shape in the properties panel, you can increase the feather. So you can blur that even more. So I'll blur it just a little bit more to create that effect there. And you can see the result. Also, I would like for my lightsaber to create a glow. So for my libraries panel, on my working document, I do have this lens flare that I will place on top of everything else. And actually, I don't want to place it there, so let me escape that. I wanted to place it up here. And same thing we did earlier, change the blending mode to screen so that we can only keep the bright pixels. And I can just place that right about there. Let me zoom in so I can get the glow in the right area. I'll transform it. That's a little small. I want it to be more dramatic. So maybe something like that. That looks pretty good, I would say. What we're going to do now is work on some of the glows on the actual Jedi because this lightsaber is emitting light. So I want the light to hit her. So what we can do is create a solid color. We'll make it blue, same as a lightsaber or a similar color. And I'll change the blending mode to maybe vivid light might work great. Let's do vivid light and maybe reduce the fill just a tiny little bit. And I'll double click to the side of the layer and make sure that the darkest areas are not completely affected, like so. Then on this mask, I'll press Control I on Windows, Command I on the Mac to invert. And with white, I can paint on that solid color fill layer mask, I should say. And let me select a different brush, like this soft brush here. And that's a little too strong, so let me click on that icon to activate the pressure, sensitivity, and opacity. And you can just see how now I'm selecting where that blue light will hit her body. So you kind of have to figure out where you think that blue light will hit her body. So something like that. And we'll call this good. If it's too strong, you can always reduce the fill, like so. I think this is looking pretty good. Yeah, we're definitely not going to have time to cover everything, but I'm going to try to show you some of the most important things in this stream. Now, before we continue, what I like to do once I get to this point is, first of all, make sure that I'm organized. So I'm going to put all these layers into a group, and I'll call it foreground. And then I'm going to press Control Alt Shift E, Command Option Shift E on the Mac, and call this layer Final. Convert it to a smart object, and I'm going to start feeling out how the final effect is going to look by applying adjustments to this final smart object with the camera raw filter. And in here, I can maybe add a little bit of contrast, make the shadows a bit darker, maybe increase the texture just to make some of these details pop, adjust the clarity, increase the vibrance, and also add sharpening to my image. By the way, if you hold Alt and Windows Option on the Mac and click on the masking slider, you can see where the sharpening effect will be applied. So I'm going to drag it pretty far to the right so that the effect is only applied on the edges, and that's what I want. Also, I'm going to go into the effects panel, and I always like to add a little bit of grain. Notice how smooth some of these areas are. So just by adding grain, things will look better. Also, I'm going to blur some of the areas in this composite. So grain will definitely help alleviate some of the issues that will be created with the blurs that we apply. I'm also going to bring down the vignetting to kind of center my Jedi. And from the masking panel, I'm going to create this linear gradient from the bottom part here. And I'm just going to reduce the exposure there. And I'm also going to go into the detail panel and reduce sharpness to blur that bottom area, just to create a little bit of depth. And you can see more or less that we're getting what our image will look when we have a final result. There's still a lot of work to do, not a lot of time, but I'll show you another cool trick. If we go back into the Jedi here, you'll notice that I have this graphic here of this lady. What I'm going to do is just select her arm, because I'm going to replace the arm. I want a more muscular arm with a highlight there, a rim light. So I'm just going to take that and I'm going to place it here. And now that the arm is here, I can worry about making a better selection. So I'm going to select her arm like so. That looks pretty good. I can create a layer mask. Notice how there's a black line going around her arm like so. We can fix that by going into the smooth slider to make sure that we have a smooth arm, increase the contrast to make it sharper, press OK. The line is still there, but if you go into filter, other, and minimum, we can minimize that mask or contract that mask so that line is gone. So maybe we'll just make it 2 pixels even. Make sure you set it to roundness, because squareness gives you whole numbers. Roundness, you can use decimal points like 2.1. I'll press OK. And this is looking pretty good. I'm going to convert this into a smart object so I can distort it non-destructively, and I can place this arm into position. Notice that I held Alt and click so I can put the pivot point right there. And actually, maybe I want it a little bit higher, but I want to scale from that area and rotate from that area. So I'm just going to try to match it as best as I can to the original arm. Something like that should work. And it's not as wide as I would like it to be, so then I can maybe distort that accordingly as well. Maybe I could also warp it so I can get it to be, her arm's probably going to be way bigger than I intended, but that's okay. She's super strong because she is a Jedi. Something like that. And then maybe I could also go into edit, puppet warp. Oops, sorry, wrong command. Edit, puppet warp. And I can just warp this accordingly as well. Just trying to get it to match as best as possible. It's never going to be perfect, and that's okay. I just need it to be close enough. So maybe something like that. That looks pretty good. So what I'll do now is hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac, and click to hide that. And I can paint the arm back in these areas. Like so. And I need my brush tool. And actually, you know what? Since we already have that arm there, I can probably use that to make my selection instead of just trying to paint. So with that layer selected, I'm just going to select this part here. Like so. And this will be good enough. The rest I'll do by hand. So there's the arm that I was working with. I'll delete that layer mask and just create this one here. And now at this point, I can make a decision, right? I can just keep the original shoulder, or I can go for the more bulkier one. I kind of like the bulkier one. It just makes her seem so much stronger. So I'll keep the original shoulder. But, you know, she doesn't have to be that bulky if you don't want her to be. There we go. That looks much, much better. And then these smaller details, again, I will adjust by hand. Like so. And again, I'm not going to spend time on these small details, but you get the idea. So that's her arm. Obviously, that's way too dark. I need to match it to the rest of her body. So with the curves adjustment layer, I can clip it to the layer below, drag up to wet light. Just make sure you do that. And you can adjust the reds to also adjust the color of the skin so that it matches a little bit better if you want, whatever you think works. So before and after. And something that I would recommend that you do is create another layer, clip it to the layer below, select the color of the shadows like that one there, and come in here and then just paint in some shadows just so that the composite doesn't look so flat and so fake. Make sure you change the blending mode to multiply, and you can just create a shadow that would be created by that cape, like so. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on these smaller details, but I think that you get the idea. And just so that you can see, this is what I came up with when I had just a little bit more time. There it is. Something I did here too is I added a little bit of sweat to her body, to her shoulder. And the way that I added sweat was actually kind of funny. I think I have I have this drops layer here. I think that's the one I use. Oh no, actually that's not the one I use. This looks similar. This is the one I use. Yeah, I use this drops layer and I just made it super tiny, kind of like that. Make sure that the shadows and highlights are in the right spot, the light's coming from the right, and kind of added that in here more or less right about this big, give or take. Clip it to a layer below, change the blending mode to soft light, soft light. And then I went into image, adjustment, levels, and then with this gray point slider, if I get it right in the middle here, notice how the gray starts disappearing and I only have the drops. And that's basically what I did. With the layer mask, I hid everything by holding Alt, Option, clicking in the mask icon, and just paint it with white on certain areas to reveal those drops. So see how she has sweat now on her arm there? That's basically what I did. And the cool thing about working non-destructive is I can always make a selection out of everything by pressing Control A. Control Alt C is copy merge. So Shift Control C. Control Shift C, Command Shift C on the Mac. And then I can paste that in here. So you can see the difference, right? And when I close it and save it, Photoshop will apply the effects to that edited version. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Do I use Substance 3D, Jaina? No, I haven't used it, Jaina. So no, I do not use Substance 3D. Do you like Affinity Photo? I've never used it, so I don't know if I like it. Is this stream saved? Yeah, Red, this stream will be on my YouTube channel just like all my other streams. So yeah, definitely will be saved. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the nice comments. I really, really appreciate that. Dito said, I'm an elephant. I don't know what that means. Awesome. Cool. Let's see. We don't. The stream is technically over, but we'll just go a little longer, just because there's more stuff I want to show you that we didn't get to. So some of the things that I want to show you is how to put the items in the back here, behind here. So on, I have like this Imperial Walker here, and I'm just gonna place it into position right about here, make them larger, flip them horizontally. To make something look like it's in 3D space, like there's depth, you have to apply some of the techniques that traditional artists with painting apply. And one of those techniques is atmospheric perspective. So if you're familiar with painting and art, basically the same thing, but you just do it in Photoshop. So between your eye and something that's very far away, there's going to be a lot of particles in the way. So I live in California. If I look out my window, I can see a mountain, and the mountain almost always looks blue during the day because there's a lot of, I don't know, water particles, there's air in the way, there's smog, there's all kinds of things between my eye and the mountain. So there's going to be less contrast, and those things that are further away are going to start taking the color of the sky. So that's why that's the illusion that I'm going to try to recreate here to make it seem like that Imperial Walker is far away. To do that, you can double click to the side of the layer, click on color overlay, and then just select the color of the sky, like so. And then change the blending mode to normal and just bring the opacity down a little bit. See that? See how just by doing that, it seems like the Imperial Walker is actually further away, before and after. So it's just a really simple trick and technique that you can use. Basically the same technique that I used on that one. On that one, I spent a little more time fine-tuning it, but same idea. With the ship here, and I'm sorry, I don't know the name of this ship, you can use exactly the same technique. To save some time, I'll hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac, click on the FX icon, and drag it onto the ship layer. This ship is it'll probably seem darker, even though it's further away. I mean, if it was really far away, it probably look like that, but you can adjust it, make it seem like it's closer. I don't know, whatever you prefer, but just adjust it so that it looks good to your eye. Let me see, what else am I missing? I thought we did the Stormtrooper line. I must have accidentally deleted the layer while I was talking. Sorry about that if I did, but there was a line of Stormtroopers down there unless I hid the layer. No, it looks like I might have deleted it by accident. I'll have to go watch the recording and see when I deleted that line of Stormtroopers. But anyway, what we can do now is just bring in one of these Stormtroopers here. And again, oh, actually, you know what? Something you should do, and that I will do, is these Stormtroopers look very clean, and I don't think that looks realistic. So you can use the same technique I used earlier. Just find any grunge texture and just apply it to your Stormtroopers, sort of like I did earlier. You can just, use one or use multiple ones. I'll probably use a combination. I'll probably use two in this case. I'm going to drag this one up like so to create two. And then I'll merge these two together, clip it to the layer below, change the overlay to something like soft light, and I will remove that effect from the darker areas like so. And I'll use levels this time, no real difference. There you go. He just looks a little dirtier, a little messier, and I think that looks more realistic than him being completely clean. And obviously you can spend as much time as you want adjusting it. Now, the reason that I did this in this layer is so that I can convert it into a smart object. And even though I didn't do this in my real composite, I'll still show you in this one. So if I have this image here, this layer with the Stormtrooper, I can duplicate him, right? And if I decide that I want to make an adjustment to my Stormtrooper, like maybe, I don't know, maybe I think I have a cracks layer. Maybe just add cracks to him as well. And that's probably too much, right? So we'll need to adjust it. Yeah, that's way too much, but you'll get the idea when you see what happens. I can just paint in with white after making a black mask on the areas where I want some of those cracks to appear, right? like so. There we go. Just a few cracks, right? So when I save this, since I used a smart object to begin with, it's going to apply to both stormtroopers, and that's something that you may want, may not want, but in case you do, that's one of the reasons why I converted it into a smart object. But anyway, I'm going to scale this down into position, put him right about, he's getting closer to us, he's getting close to the beach, put him right about there. And what I'll do is create a curves adjustment layer, clip it to the layer below, and try to match the lighting as best as I can. And actually, you should be facing the other way, like so. The light's coming from the right side. And with a layer mask, I'm just gonna hide his feet because the feet are in the water. So something like that. And also here's a trick for you. I'm gonna now switch to white and then just do one giant brush stroke to bring everything back. And I can go into edit, fade, and I can use this slider to kind of fade that in. So I kind of want his feet to sort of be visible just a little bit. And in areas like here where it's too much, I'll just hide him completely. So something like that. So his feet are kind of visible. Also, I have a brush called, I think it's called Water. I think it might be this one. Yeah, this one. And this is by Cal T. Webster. I'll show you how to get the brush. I'm just going to paint with white, and I'm just going to create these water ripples by painting with white. See that? There we go. That works fantastic. And you can get that brush by Cal T. Webster by going into your brushes panel, and on this drop down, go into the gear icon and select get more brushes. That's going to take you to an Adobe page that looks like this. And these are free brushes from Cal T. Webster from Adobe. They're professional brushes, ABR files that you can use for Photoshop, Photoshop on the iPad, Adobe Fresco. And as you can see, there's a ton of different packs that you can download. They're constantly updated, so make sure that you come and get your free brushes. The concept brushes are the ones that I've been using in my composites, so make sure that you check this one out. Click on the download button, click on the ABR file, and it will automatically install in your installation of Photoshop. So highly, highly recommend that you do that. The question by DM Architect is, what is my Photoshop version? I'm always in the latest version of Photoshop, whatever version I'm recording in. At the moment is Photoshop 2022. And if you want to know specifically what version it is, it's 23.3.1. So there you go. The question is MSI better than Apple? I mean, that as a company, I'm not sure. It's easier to say, is this particular laptop better than another particular laptop? Then that's an easier question to answer. They're both great companies. I have Apple products. I have an iPad. I have a MacBook as well. But my main computers are PC. They're MSI. So I'm streaming from an MSI computer. I have the laptop attached to this whole setup. The MSI laptop attached to the whole setup. I've always been a Windows person. If you go back and watch my first tutorial, it was recorded on a Windows machine. I've always preferred Windows, but I can't tell you if a company is better than another. I can tell you if a product is better than another one, looking at the specific specs and things like that. What I can tell you is that MSI rated alongside Apple at the very top with overall consumer satisfaction. So in that regard, yes, it's just as good as Apple, if not better. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, so the stream has been over for about 10 minutes, but why not? Let's just show one other thing. Let me look at my final composite and see what will work better for the stream. So we talked about textures, we talked about stormtroopers. I guess what I'll finish the stream by is talking about creating the shadow. So creating the shadow will be, pretty simple. All you need to do is go into your Jedi foreground layer here. Click on the Jedi. Is that the Jedi? Nope, that's the stormtrooper. Where is my Jedi? Here it is. My Jedi is here. And you can click on the layer mask to make a selection out of the entire Jedi, and I can just create a new layer on top of everything else so that I can see what I'm doing. Fill it with a dark color, not black. I don't like my shadows to be black, so I just select the darkest color I can find in the sand here. Maybe that one. If it's not dark enough, I can just make it darker and fill with that color. Change the blending mode to multiply, and then I can transform that layer and distort it accordingly so that it matches my scene. And something like this looks pretty good. Then I can make a selection out of this part like so. And obviously I could do a little bit better of a job than I did there, but I think you get the idea. I'm just going to now paint with that brush, hard brush like so. Whoops, sorry about that. And I'm just gonna fill in these mistakes. And obviously I did a really bad job distorting the shadow there, but that's okay. Mistakes do happen. And I'm just gonna make her leg a little thicker. I think her leg was a little skinny. Something like that. And if you want, you can use the for warp tool, not the for warp tool, I'm sorry, the smudge tool, and sort of smudge it and make, you know, these manual adjustments so that the shadow matches the sand. And obviously you can spend a lot of time doing that, and you can bring down the opacity accordingly, create a layer mask, go into the gradient tool, and then just from white to black create something that looks like that. And then you can decide what looks good to your eye. Still trying to find a good spot, maybe something like that. And I can press Control A to copy, merge, go into my final document here, paste it, close it, save it, and there it is. It's looking much better. So that's basically how I created this Star Wars composite. Let me know if you have any final questions before I let you go. Oh, awesome. So very good question. So I forgot to mention this. So currently the Photoshop Summit is going on. Let me show you what that is. Thank you so much for reminding me. So the Photoshop Virtual Summit is here. There's a link to it in the description. Go now, look in the description. The Photoshop Summit is going on. It's free to watch during this week. After this week, the recordings are available for purchase, but there's videos by me, my good friend Aaron Nays, Christina Shirk, Colin Smith, Dave Cross, Glenn Dewis, Lisa Carney, who I spoke to you guys about earlier, Julianne Koss, Matt Kloskowski, Corey Barker. I mean, all these guys are amazing, and ladies. So make sure that you check out the Photoshop Summit. It's free to watch between May 2nd and May 6th. I had a stream yesterday. I think my next stream is tomorrow. But you can get your free pass, link in the description. And if you want to purchase our recordings, you can. But you can come in there and check out the free sessions that are going on right now. So a lot of training, 20 experts, Photoshop classes. So make sure that you check it out. Thank you so much for reminding me. Oh, good question, Rodney. I like that question. So Rodney, you reminded me of something else. So thank you guys for the great questions. So what font did I use? I went to fonts.adobe.com, and there's this section where you can select an image, and I have an image here for the logo for Rogue One. So I dropped the image onto the visual search to figure out what font they used, and Adobe Fonts has automatically selected Rogue One. If it doesn't select it, you can drag these handles to select it. Click on next step. And for some reason it added these extra spaces, but I don't want the extra spaces. So Rogue One, there it is. Click on next, and you can see that Rogue One, the font is either Trajan Pro 3 or something very similar. So this is what I used. I used Trajan Pro 3 regular and activated to my Creative Cloud. Now the question always comes up, well, why do I need to use Adobe fonts? Why can't I use another free resource online? The question is, you can use whatever source you like. The problem comes into play when you're designing for a client with for actual commercial paid work. You can't just use fonts that you find on the internet, much like you can't just take someone's photo and then use it on your project without their permission or without licensing. Same thing with fonts. So Adobe Fonts gives you a license that you can use for pretty much anything for commercial projects, client work, personal work. You can use the fonts in a copyrighted logo, all this sort of stuff. As you can see, you can use the fonts on a logo. You can copyright the logo that you use with the font, all that sort of stuff. So Adobe takes care of all the licensing issues that may come up if you just download a font from the internet where you may not have all the rights to use on logos or commercial work or what have you. But if you're doing it for fun, then go right ahead. We all do it for fun projects. But if you're doing commercial work, I highly recommend that you use fonts that you have a license to, because you don't want your client to get into problems later with a design that you created for them. But anyway, I use the visual search on fonts.adobe.com to find the Trajan Pro font, which is what I used here. And as you can see, it's just a regular text layer right here. See that? Rogue 2 and it's Trajan Pro 3. Very, very simple. It's a good question. Some troops seem not to have shadows. I'm not sure what you mean. Are you talking about? Oh, right. So I mean, I could have added the shadows on the stormtroopers. Like I said, all this was created just for a stream, so it definitely could have had more shadows. One thing that I did do, and now that you're talking about shadows, is I would recommend for something like this, I would recommend going into the bevel and emboss and then changing the lighting to the position so that it matches your scene. Maybe you can soften it up a little bit, change the blending mode to maybe overlay and bring it down a little bit like so. And also we have the highlight here, and just adjust it accordingly so that it matches your scene. You can see the stormtrooper there. So that's something that I did to kind of help match the lighting. You can see the before and the after there. See that? And actually this layer needs to be above the other ones so that it's in the actual position that it should be. But before and after. Cool. What about Google Fonts? Good question. I'm not really sure about the licensing on Google Fonts. You're gonna have to read through their licensing and see what you can use the fonts for. Since it's Google, I'm assuming it's okay, but don't quote me on that. I haven't read the licensing for Google Fonts, so I can't give you an answer to that question. Let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, so Vishal is saying that they really enjoy my 1-minute Photoshop tutorials. I've been posting 1-minute Photoshop tutorials on YouTube, so make sure that you check them out. I'm having trouble getting to my YouTube channel. Oh, I thought I had it open. Well, if on YouTube you go, oh look, there we are in this stream right here. If you go into my YouTube channel, you can see the shorts section here. These are all 1-minute Photoshop tutorials that you can check out. So you feel free to watch one after this stream. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. A big thanks to our sponsors, MSI, for sponsoring the Photoshop Training Hour. The Creator Z16 laptop, Z16P laptop. The link is in the description. It's an amazing machine. I highly recommend that you check MSI and their products.